How do you configure multi-factor authentication for your AWS account? We are mitigating the risk of unauthorized access. And risk management is a function of likelihood and impact. In this case, we're focusing on reducing the likelihood of unauthorized access. If you have single factor authentication, only a password, all that is required to get access is to get your password, and something as relatively simple as spyware could already get your password, and people could have your password for months or years without you knowing if you don't reset the password. You can reduce the likelihood of this access by introducing multi-factor authentication. In short, multi-factor authentication is a combination of something you know, like your password, something you have, like a hardware security token or your phone, and something you are, which would typically be a fingerprint, an iris scan, or a facial scan. And if you have two or more of these factors, you call it multi-factor authentication. So how do you do this in AWS? Let's have a look at the console. Here we have the opening page of the console, and we go to the upper right menu of the screen. We select it and we go to security credentials. When I open this page, you will notice that I already have a multi-factor authentication token configured. You may have none, which would be all the more reason to configure one. I'm not going to remove this, but instead, just to show you a demo, I'm going to add one. So I'll select Assign MFA device. Here I can give the device a name, so I call it Demo, and it gives me three options. Passkey or security key. Passkey would typically come from your password manager, or security key would be one of those hardware tokens, like a USB token, similar to a YubiKey, for example, is a popular one that you can use for security. This is probably the one that we're going to select, but we'll get to that. Other options would be an authenticator app. If you don't have a password manager that supports passkeys, you could use an app like Google Authenticator, but I'd say prefer the passkey if you can. And finally, there are still these hardware TOTP tokens. You remember those tokens with the LCD display that generate a number every 30 seconds? But I'd say prefer the USB key because you don't need to change the batteries like in these. So let's select passkey or security key. If I select next, my password manager, yours may be different, pops up, and by default it will want to create a passkey for me. However, if I want to do something different, I can select other options here. And now I have the choice between passwords. This is my password manager. I use Apple Password, but yours might be different. It could give me the option to create a passkey on an external device. And finally, the security key that we talked about. So if this is for personal use and you don't want to spend any extra money on it, probably the passkey is the most low-cost option. However, if you're using this professionally, if these are the root keys of the management account of your company and there's a lot of customer data in there, I'd suggest to prefer the security key because you can lock it up safely in a safety deposit box and perhaps put the responsibility with your security department. In this case, it's a personal account. I'm not willing to spend a whole lot of money on this, so I'm going ahead with the passwords. So I select this and it will want my fingerprint to go ahead. And now it has already created a new multi-factor authentication token called Demo. And I can remove my old one just to not get confused between the two. And now I have added my new multi-factor authentication token. If you've never done this before, I can't stress enough, get multi-factor authentication in place because a root account, in particular for a management account, can be very, very, very powerful. So configure your multi-factor authentication as soon as you can, preferably now.